Welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm Reverend Paul Beckel. Welcome to those of you here in Bellingham and to those of you who are joining us on Zoom. I am so glad that so many could gather together today, here and from afar. We are here to remember and to honor Julie Guy. Julie has died, but she leaves behind such a legacy of accomplishment, relationships, and most of all, inspirations for all of us to carry forward. We gather today to share stories that might rekindle in us some of the courage and vitality we observed in Julie. So as part of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we kindle such light, such warmth, such fire of commitment that she embodied here in our flaming chalice. That works. Good enough. We are here as well to mourn her passing, our loss, the hole in our lives now in Julie's absence. What was her own perspective on death? Perhaps knowing this can both remind us of her broad perspective on life and provide some comfort today. She asked that we share this wisdom today from Shunryu Suzuki. It's called Nirvana, the Waterfall. I went to Yosemite National Park. This is Shunryu Suzuki speaking. And I saw huge waterfalls. The highest is 1,300 feet. And from it, the water comes down like a curtain thrown from the top of the mountain. It does not seem to come down swiftly, as you might expect. It seems to come down very slowly because of the distance. And the water does not come down as one stream, but is separated into many streams. It must be a very difficult experience for each drop of water to come down from the top of such a high mountain. It takes time, a long time, for the water to finally reach the bottom. Our human lives may be like this. We have many difficult experiences in our life, but the water was not originally separated. It was once one whole river. Only when the water is separated does it have some difficulty in falling. It is as if the water does not have any feeling when it's one whole river. Only when separated into many drops can it begin to have or to express some feeling. Before we were born, we had no feeling. We were one with the universe. After we are separated by birth from this oneness, as the water falling from the waterfall is separated by the wind and the rocks, then we have feeling. You have difficulty because you have feeling. You attach to the feeling without knowing just how this kind of feeling is created. When you do not realize that you are really one with the water or one with the universe, you have fear. When you do not realize that you are one with the water, one with the universe, you have fear. Whether it is separated into drops or not, water is water. Our life and death are the same thing. When we realize this fact, we have no fear of death anymore, and we have no actual difficulty with our life. When the water returns to its original oneness with the river, it no longer has any individual feeling to it. It resumes its own nature and finds composure. How very glad the water must be to come back to that original river. If that is so, what feeling will we have when we die? Just now, we have some fear of death, but after we resume our true original nature, there is nirvana. As you might guess from that, Julie was not one for conventional wisdom. She was skeptical of conventional wisdom. She was simultaneously confident and humble regarding her own wisdom. She was an example of integrity and generosity of spirit, and she was a leader. What are the qualities of a true leader? I'll break it down to two. Don't take things for granted, and don't take people for granted. Julie did not take things or people for granted. Regarding things, when she encountered obstacles, she did not sigh and walk away moaning that nothing could be done. But neither did she arrogantly assume that she could accomplish anything she put her mind to, especially not all by herself. She was a skeptic. She was a realist. Before assessing any situation, she made sure to be informed and to stay informed for 96 years about this ever-changing world in which she was determined to get things done. She was a religious skeptic. When she met me for the first time, she was 89, and she made a point to tell me that she hadn't stepped into a church for 71 years. I'm not into that foolish mumbo-jumbo, she said. She relied on common sense. And yet, at the same time, she was conscious of her own limits, not to be misled by what seemed obvious only to herself. She listened, and then she came up with an intelligent assessment of a situation and told us, calmly, succinctly, how she thought it was best to go from there. Then she sat there and she listened again. And if she wasn't satisfied, she would again, maybe with some modification, calmly and succinctly say how she thought it was best to go from there. And again, she persisted. Julie also did not take people for granted. Neither her friends, nor her family, nor her community, nor the opposition. Regarding those who got in the way of her projects and her visions, she didn't fret or fume or denigrate. She persisted. She was gracious, teaching by doing, but understanding that not everyone would follow, but knowing that she had something to offer and continuing to offer it. Here at Buff, she joined the financial oversight team at age 89 and continued to mentor those who came later. She did not take relationships for granted. During the pandemic, when she came here less and less on Sundays, she took on the assignment of making phone calls to others in the congregation who were not getting out. And even to her last days, she was making phone calls to people she had known throughout her life, so she could say goodbye on her own terms with joy and appreciation. Today, I would like those of you who know her in all different contexts to share what you know about her. Well, not everything you know about her, because there's a lot. and there's a lot of you. So I'm gonna ask not that you share her achievements, because there's a long list of those and we can find them elsewhere, but brief personal anecdotes that revealed her character. And we're going to take a moment of silence now to think about that, because whether you share or not, when you leave here today, I want you to take with you some of those stories, or your own story, if in this time of silence, if you can remember one story that revealed what she meant to you and what qualities you would like to carry on. We're not going to remember all of those long lists of accomplishments. And if we do, we might say, oh my gosh, I can't do all of that. But remember that one quality, that one moment of your experience that you would like to give to the world as she did. So let's just take a moment of silence now to remember. So I'm going to invite you now, if you'd like, you can come up to the podium here. If that is difficult for you, I have a handheld mic that I can walk around to give everyone an opportunity. Not everyone. We're going to have a reception afterwards, and those of you who don't want to speak in public, I hope you will share stories at greater length. But I can walk around for those of you who would like to share from the pews. So come on up. Let's do this. Those of you who would like to speak from the podium, when you're all done, we'll have a little interlude, and then I'll come around into the pews. So. Oh no, come on. I mean, does that work out for you to get up? Okay. Yep, we've got time.
Hi, my name's Ralph Myers. Can you hear me okay? Julie's, this is not the end, this is the beginning. Julie was something special. I got to know her through working with her in the neighborhood association, serving, and I know how dedicated she was. But more importantly, I got to know Julie from spending a lot of time with her for about 18 months when we wrote the book, that Beacon of Community Development. At that time, she and I were meeting quite frequently, going over the archives and records of the Coronado Neighborhood Association. She was an amazing lady. She was funny. I always enjoyed her sense of humor because I sometimes have a rather perverse sense of humor, and she and I got along great with that. But she was just a treasure. I'm not a whole lot younger than she was, but nevertheless, I'm younger, but I still consider Julie as my mentor. She was a wonderful lady. I'm going to miss her so much. And as I will always remember Julie, more or less her statement, her motto was, no is the beginning of yes. And for those of you, particularly with the city of Bellingham, that she worked so hard in getting our library and our parks for, you know, that Julie, you might tell her no, but she knew what was going to happen sooner or later down the line. So in any event, Julie, I love you. I'm going to miss you as we are. And it's a wonderful day. And I think somehow you're watching over us and probably saying, you know, hey, I don't deserve this, but you surely do, Julie. Thank you.
I'm notoriously bad with mics. Can you hear me okay? No? Is that better? There we go. That's the sweet spot. I'm Seth Fleetwood. I'm the mayor of Bellingham, and it's my honor to be able to, just right out of the gate, express the just enormous gratitude for, on behalf of the people of Bellingham, to Juliana Guy. She's just absolutely remarkable person. This is why I'm not good at this sort of thing. So I had the good fortune personally of just coming across Julie about 13 years ago, in that fateful way that life happens and unfolds and intersects with people. I happened to have just joined the Bellingham City Council, and former Mayor Dan Pike was at a ribbon cutting. I think it was 2010, and we were all out at what became Juliana Park. It wasn't named that yet at the time, but I got to meet her and became friends with her and colleagues of sorts with her in city building. She was a passionate advocate, as we know, for, among other things, parks and recreational areas and all things sort of required in the north side of town. So it was just, she was one of these people who, something about her kind soul and her soothing low voice and her twinkling eyes, she was just instantly likable. And it was always something that I looked forward to immensely when I got to go have lunch with her or whatever the occasion was. Number of Greenways people are here. Today I can see Don Keenan and John Blethen and Steve Walker, Nicole Oliver. And the last time I saw her, I see Janice and Nicole over there from the city. And as I shared with you, here she was only 5 days away from passing away. She was as alert as you could possibly imagine, and she expressed her love and appreciation for Nicole Oliver and Janice Keller in our office. Had wonderful things to say about Rebecca Judd. Gosh, I could go all around. She was just effusive in her expressions. Just final personal story, because that's what you asked for. Sorry. I heard that she was taking guests. It was Wednesday. I think she passed away on Saturday, perhaps, or Sunday. And I went over after work. I remember we had a Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Commission that night, and I had a brief little window to go and speak with, see Julie. And I walked into her room, and she was about as alert and energetic as you would ever, I mean, as she always was. It was sort of fascinating, actually, that she was truly leaving on her own terms. And I went in, and she said she was talking, her nieces and nephews were in the room with her. And she said, "We were just talking about you." And I, of course, was curious. And they left. They went down. "We'll give you some time." They went down to the cafeteria, and I sat down with Julie. And she said she knew that I was in the midst of this delightful thing called a election campaign. She didn't mention that, but she said, she took my hand and she said, I don't want you to worry if you don't make it. She said, you're gonna be okay. And she said, I got fired once by the governor of Alaska, and he was a jerk. And she said, I moved. So she came here, as we all know, 20 years ago when she was 76 years old. And she said, if you don't make it, you're going to have another act. I had another act. I had a couple more acts, and you might have a couple more acts too. So what was so sweet about it, of course, is that here she was at the end of her life, and she was just saying something nice about somebody else. She was selfless, and that was really sweet. It was also inspiring because she's so right, you know. Life goes on, and we've got other things to do. We're not defined by any one thing. So I thought that was just wise of her. Another 20 years of amazing life starting at 76. So anyway, thank you.
I'm Morgan Kristen. I'm somebody who met Julie in Alaska. We've had some really great governors, too. But anyway, I met her when I was about 25 years old. And so I'm not going to talk about her projects or accomplishments, but I want to say that Julie expressed absolute confidence in me when I was a really young person. And it was a tremendous gift. I want to thank her for her unconditional friendship, for always being there for me, and to say that it made a huge difference in my life to have someone who's older and more experienced really express that kind of confidence in me. And I've been reflecting today that that's a gift that she gave to me, and that I think that many people can return to other young people that we know.
Oops. Okay, can you hear me okay? Hi, I'm Linda McCarthy. I'm the CEO of Mount Baker Planned Parenthood, and I had a 20-year love affair with Julie. She came to Bellingham, and when she did, she moved into town. She called me and said, it's important for me to find my peeps, and that's Planned Parenthood, and why aren't there any parks in the north end of Bellingham? And so she wanted to talk about that, so we went and met for lunch, and that was the beginning of a very long-term relationship. She was passionate about her community, and as it says in here, she was passionate about Planned Parenthood. She was horrified with what is going on, state of affairs in the country today when it comes to reproductive rights, and she would be the first email that I would see or first phone call that I would get anytime anything horrific would happen, and she would just call to say, I'm thinking of you, I know you've got this, you know, when we were laughing about what Seth just said about, or what was said before that by Mr. Myers about, you know, no means yes, and her thing for Planned Parenthood was failure is not an option, so what are we gonna do? And she was on our finance committee. She mentored many people. She mentored me the entire time. She adored our staff, Deanna and Jenny, that she worked with. She called them out. And just as early as, or as late as a few years ago, she was working on a financial literacy slide deck with us. So she never let anything go. But the funny story that I'll tell you was, she didn't have a car, and I didn't have a car growing up. We never had a car. And so my mom, I learned little things with my mom, which was when you ever picked her up anywhere, to take her anywhere to do something, there was like 5 things. And it would just be, just pick me up at the grocery store, then like, by the way, let's stop at this and let's do that. It was okay, so I was just my mom. Well, Julie was kind of the same way. And so she would call me up, and one day we were going to have lunch, and it got held up because she had a doctor's appointment, and while the local transportation would get you to where you needed to go on time, like waiting to get picked up was another thing. So when she told me that one day, and I said, well, why don't you like get them to drive you there, and then you can call me, and I'll come pick you up, and we'll have lunch or something like that. Okay. Well, and that started a fun relationship where she would pick me up, and then I would kind of guess how many stops we would have on the way, and who knew that she bought her toothpaste from the dentist, but she did, and I got used to, taking her there. And it was just really sweet because it reminded me a lot of my own roots as a kid. And the thing that I think for Julie is nevertheless she persisted in through everything, and she just would not take no for an answer. And when I would ask her about her work with the parks, because that's where she was working and trying to get, she would talk about Mayor Linville and how she would be after Mayor Linville, okay, if we can't have a park, what about a picnic table? Right? And we want to just people can be able to go and have a picnic with their kids. And she told me a couple years ago that when Mayor Linville retired, she gave her a model of a picnic table with her name engraved on it, which I thought was rather sweet. But she, went from, okay, we'll get a picnic table to, no, okay, we're going to get a park and we're going to have some trails. But she did it in a way, and I think everybody who's spoken, she just has this lovely style and a wonderful, disarming manner. And before you knew it, you were, sort of brought into the essence of what was Julie and her ability to get things done, and the fact that she said, you have to have a long game. And we would joke often about the long, sharp pokers that we have, that we would slowly move people to where we want them to go without them even knowing they've been prodded. And next thing you know, bingo, you kind of have a park, or you actually have a real picnic table, and now you have trails, you have a park to come up on King Mountain, and you have a playground that gave her such joy. And one of the last conversations I had with her was about that. And I was driving by when she would be going home and just seeing all the little kids running around and laughing, and the families out there and doing, having a great time. So my last, when I went to see Julie, when I'd visit her at home, I would always try to bring her something from Planned Parenthood, because she's just that's why I'm wearing pink. You had to fly our colors or do something, which is always just a fun little thing that I would do. Well, and here I am going up to visit her in the hospital, and I'm like, what am I going to bring to Julie? So some of you get to visit her saw this. We have these little tattoos that are temporary. You just stick them down, you put a little bit of water on them. And so we have one for Pride that has a heart with the Pride colors and has the PP in the center. So I brought one up, and I said, look, I didn't know what to bring you for Planned Parenthood today, but I didn't want to come empty-handed, so I brought you something. And it's this little tattoo. It's temporary. And before I could even finish saying it, she just pulled her little gown down. She says, right here. Put it right here, right now. So I did, and and it looked just beautiful on her. And then I was able to go, thank you to her family, to go visit her the next night. And I walk in, and she's laying there with this. And I have this great picture I can show you if you come downstairs. And she said to me, you said, see this tattoo right here? She goes, this tattoo has been photographed more than most people. I love it. And I'll leave you with that. And Julie, I love you, and everyone at Planned Parenthood thanks you for the many sacrifices and contributions you made from Tacoma to Alaska and back to Bellingham.
Hi, I'm Rick Smith. I'm going to speak for my mother, Orphalie Smith, and if my sister will let me, my sister Randy also. It's hard to believe that Julie's not not with us anymore, because Julie's been with my family since I was just a couple of years old, up in Anchorage, Alaska. My family had just moved to Anchorage. Dad was working as an accountant. Mom was still studying for the CPA exam, and then Julie shows up. And Julie asks around and finds out that there is maybe one other woman in Anchorage that has a CPA license, and she's got a plan. And the plan was, let's start American Society of Women Accountants chapter in Anchorage. So she gets a hold of Mom, and sooner or later, pretty soon, after many meetings, which I think was also an excuse to drink some good scotch, because she definitely enjoyed some good scotch, and so did my parents too. And pretty soon there was this American Society of Women Accountants chapter started, and it was going really well. And then all of a sudden, Julie left. I think that may have been about the time she may have been fired, but she moved down to Tacoma, moved away. But we still kept in touch with Julie, it was by mail and everything. And eventually we made our way to Bellingham. And things were great in Bellingham. We were living on the South Hill, and all of a sudden Julie shows up. And Seth, by the way, Julie showed up when we were still at Seahome. The first time. She bought this crazy, crazy house on Douglas and 16th. I remember Dad coming home and just shaking his head. He's like, Julie, she made the craziest investment. That is the strangest house. But it was, it was Julie. It fit Julie, and Julie fit into it really well. But Julie had another great idea. Let's start a women accountants group here in Bellingham. So with some more scotch, although, excuse me, by that time I think it had changed, the scotch had changed to white wine. There may have been a few other people involved than just my mother and Julie. But pretty soon there was a ASWA chapter here in Bellingham. And guess what happens? Julie moves. She moves again. But in that move, though, we were able to keep in touch with her. She only moved to Tacoma. So it was really pretty close, and Julie was still around in our lives. But it was really nice when Julie moved back to Bellingham, because it was, actually as a kid, I've been thinking about this the last week. Like I said, Julie has been in my life since I was a young child. But she was never Mrs. Guy. She was always Julie. That's really cool for a kid my age, She was always Julie. And she was the same Julie at the end that she was when I first met her. She was warm and generous, supportive, and a couple other examples of that. When my father was in the hospital and was very, hours away from passing away, there were two friends that were sitting in the hospital room with me and my family, and one of them was Julie. She was there, and she was just there chatting with us. She didn't have a message or anything that, we had to do or anything. She was just chilling, hanging out with us, and ultimately waiting for the end, and she was there till the end, and that was really nice. And then about 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. Fortunately, I'm a cancer survivor. But Julie knew I was freaking out because she saw me shortly after that. And she reached out and called me a couple days later, and just to check in. How you doing? Hey, I recognize you were stressed out and things were bothering you, but you know what? You can do this. You've got good doctors and everything's going to be great, and I'm thinking of you. That just really meant a lot to me. Anyway, so next time there's an ASWA chapter somebody wants to start, go away. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Judd. I'm the library director at the Bellingham Public Library. Boy, is it lovely to hear all these stories about Julie Guy today. I wanted to share one that I was sharing with my pew mates just a few minutes ago. When I moved to Bellingham and started my new job in 2018, one of the very first things I did was go on a tour of the Cordata neighborhood with Julie Guy, and Janice Keller put that together. And as you can imagine, it was we went all over the neighborhood, and here was Julie. I had met Julie before, and she was like, here's a development here, and it was developed in 2016. It has 54 units. It was developed by this developer. It has 3 units that have 4 bedrooms. I mean, she had every detail of every one development after another. I was like, holy mackerel, who is this woman? She knows this whole neighborhood. And of course, it was Julie Guy. And so over the years, I really came to just really appreciate and care for her. And one of the things you'll see in your program is that she had many things that she loved, and you've heard that today. Planned Parenthood and parks, and certainly libraries were on that list. And she started that Children's Library Fund way before there was a children's library. And I think Julie sort of lived by the motto of no is a beginning to yes, but also if you dream it, it will come. And so she knew that children's library would come into being, and it was just really a highlight for me, both professionally for sure, but personally to celebrate the opening of that Northside Bellis Fair branch just this last April. So really a special day, and so I just wanted to share that and to say thank you to Julie, and really kudos to a life well lived.
Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Bryson. I'm the former Parks and Recreation Director, and prior to that, I was the Development Manager. I met Julie shortly after she moved to Bellingham and came in my office and had a map, and she said, "Where's the park for our neighborhood?" And I apologized and said, unfortunately, it was master plan, but you know, there's this little open space here. But what it was going to take was some lobbying on the part of the neighborhood, but that particular neighborhood wasn't organized yet. So Julie got it organized. She started the neighborhood association. There was some grant funding available from the National Park Service, and I said there was a really short turnaround timeline, but we needed to get support from the neighborhood. She got a whole group of the neighbors together. We met, we got letters of support, and she sort of spearheaded that. We got the grant, and we developed the North Side Neighborhood Trail Plan. But the park was the thing. That was the thing that she wanted to have done, and eventually she convinced the council to put funding in, and we were able to find some property to buy. That's the park that we now know as Juliana Park. When we buy a park and we get ready to develop it, we solicit the community for names, and then that goes to the park board and ultimately to city council to make the decision on what the park should be named. Well, as you can imagine, most of the suggestions that came in were to name it Julie Guy Park, because everybody knew she was the driving force behind the fact that we had that park. And I talked to her about it. She said, absolutely not. There is no way we're having a park named after me. This is the Cordata neighborhood. We're going to name it Cordata Park, and it was named Cordata Park. Then several years later, when we were able to buy the other 25 acres on Cordata Parkway, the neighborhood really that was a community park, and they really wanted that to be Cordata Park. And again, we'll rename the other one Julie Guy Park. No, she wanted absolutely nothing to do with that. She finally relented and said if we could call it Juliana Park, she would be okay with that. And so that's how it came to be called Juliana Park, which I think it's like, just like Julie, not to want to take too much of the credit for doing the amazing things that she did for our community. From that day, I met her in my office. We became friends. She was never adversarial, even though I often had to say, no, we can't, or this or that, or whatever the reasons were. But she found a way to work through the system, to generate the support from her neighborhood, going to city council meetings, getting on the park board. Not only did she get on the park board, but she got about 5 other people from the neighborhood on the park board and the Greenway Committee. She packed the committees. And pretty soon everybody in town knew Julie Guy and that she was working for a park on the north side of town. And you know, by golly, someday it was going to happen, and now we don't have 1 park, we have 2 parks. Now that I'm retired, I am fortunate to spend my winters in a place where my grandchildren are, and it's a little bit sunnier. When I got back this spring, I went to Cordata Park, and I hadn't been there since the most recent development of the spray park. And I was there, I was walking around, it was just the dream that she had had. And so I called her up, and she didn't answer the phone. I left a message. And within a couple of minutes, she called me back, and we had the most wonderful conversation. I could tell from her voice that she was failing, and she admitted that she was, and I was so glad that we got to have that conversation, because it was just a few weeks later that she passed. But she was an inspiration to me, and I know to many other people in our community, to get involved, to always be positive, don't take no for an answer, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful person, and such a great asset for our community. And she'll be missed.
Good afternoon. My name is Dominique Zervis. I didn't really have a personal, well, I kind of had a personal relationship with Julie, but I met her at city council meetings, which I was attending as an attorney for developers. And so that meant attending a lot of meetings, and Julie was at all of them. And when so I would observe her, from across the room, and I was so impressed with her articulateness, her grace, the fact that when she spoke, people listened. She didn't speak constantly, she didn't voice about every little thing, but really addressed the key points and addressed them so well. And again, with such amazing grace and listening and persistence, as many of you have mentioned, that she had a goal, and it wasn't going to be put aside by a no or hesitation. Her communications were so articulate and so focused and based in knowledge. She never came to something just saying, no, this isn't any good, without having first attended all the meetings where you would learn about what were the underlying issues. And then I would see her, well, at that point, I sought her out. Within a few meetings, having seen her, I sought her out and just wanted to know her, and personally and professionally. And even though I don't live in North Bellingham, I ended up attending several of the association meetings and being involved in association activities in the garden, and I have an old beat-up pickup truck that ended up with the garden. So, I was fully brought in, and I was happy to be. I was proud to be part of that. Then I would see her at all the city club meetings, and it was such a joy to see her, and her humor and her intelligence, everything. I love talking with her. I will miss her. I miss her already. I will miss her enormously. At the same time, I also know that she's always going to be in me, part of me, with me, because I learned so much from her, and I continue to learn even as I think of her.
Hi, everyone. My name's Marian Wojvodich, and I met Julie 40 years ago, at least, in Tacoma when we were both working there. And even though she's old enough to be my mom, she's a lot more fun than my mom. I always considered her a contemporary and just another working girl. We've stayed in touch over the years, and the last time I saw her was on June 1st. I came up to Bellingham with a mutual friend, Sandra Purcell, and we brought lunch up and had just a wonderful visit that whole day. And we got Julie to go into the car, and she gave us a guided tour of the parks, both parks, and then the community garden, and also the library branch. So I'll always remember that day for that reason, that she was able to show us some of the projects she had a hand in bringing to fruition. But the funniest part of the day, which is why I wanted to speak, to put a little levity into this, was before we got in the car to tour around, Sandra, Julie, and I talked about who had been fired by the most important person. Now, raise your hand if you've ever been fired. I have, so don't be embarrassed. It's no big deal, right? Okay, so we decided that hands down Julie had gotten fired by the most important person, that being the governor of Alaska. And so, Julie, what happened? Tell us what happened. So, in her very calm way, I think her job at that point in time was as the director of the television broadcasting in the whole state. It was a really big job, and she was part of the governor's cabinet. And so the governor, and I don't know what his name was, but anyway, he got a call from Billy Graham, who wanted to do a TV thing, the evangelical thing on the airwaves in Alaska. And so the governor said, "Oh, sure, Billy, no problem. We'll give you as much airtime as you want." And so the governor came back and was, telling his cabinet, yeah, Billy's going to do this revival thing on TV, and it's going to be a big deal. Well, everybody on the cabinet knew that this could not happen, right? You can't just turn the public airwaves over to a religious person. So the cabinet, they talked about who's going to tell him. And Julie said, she said, the thing is, she's so altruistic and so humble, and just a slightly bit naive on this. She goes, it was kind of interesting to me that nobody really wanted to tell him, and so we're kind of all sitting around trying to figure out who's going to do it, and finally I just said, well, I'll do it. And so she said that she and several of the cabinet members walked into his office one day, and of course I can just visualize her walking point, with these other people behind her. And they sat down in front of the governor, and Julie spoke up and said, Governor so-and-so, you really can't do this. It just cannot be done. It's not legal. You cannot do this. And I guess he huffed a little bit, and that was it. Then they walked out, and it's like, well, okay, we're done with that problem. Well, a few days later, some second in command to the governor called Julie in and said, you got to go. And she said, well, why? And the woman just said, well, you know why you have to go. So that was how that shook out, was getting fired by the governor. And anyway, our little contest that day when we were comparing notes, Julie won it hands down. And the only other thing I wanted to say about Julie is I marvel at what she accomplished after she retired. And I think as I contemplate, I don't know when I'll retire because I love to work, but at some point I'm going to have to hang it up too. And I'm already thinking about, well, what can I be doing once I'm retired to make the world a better place? So I owe that to Julie. Thank you.
Well, let's have a little interlude for reflection, and then I can walk around with the microphone for a few more brief, as Julie would be, succinct reflections. Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to need you to hold the mic very close to your mouth because we can't all hear as well as we once could, and for the sake of those who are on Zoom. So, anybody? Cleo?
Thank you. My name is Cleo, and I met Juliana a couple of years ago when I moved to the Cordata neighborhood and discovered Juliana loves to eat vegetables. And she was instrumental in starting the community garden, and so I became her gardener. Whatever she wanted me to plant, I planted, and I took care of them. And one of the things she loved were beets. And so last year, I asked her if it was okay, and I drew her name in the dirt. I did Julie instead of Juliana, and then I planted the seeds and the plants in all those letters. And so this year, I planted beets again for her, and I brought one when she was passing on, because I wanted her to be able to smell it and feel it, but I knew she couldn't see it because of her macular degeneration. And she said, cremate this beet with me.
Hi there. I'm one of Julie's family members. I wish I could say I inherited some of her great traits. I'm not good at math, which is sad. I wish I could be an accountant, but I wasn't. But her inspiration for education and learning really ignited for me a passion for just focusing on school and working hard. And I felt really proud when I graduated from college. She asked me to wear her college graduation gown. That was a really big honor. I felt like, well, I'm not good at math, but I'm wearing her gown. I hope I make her proud. And I really just am marveling, looking around the room at all these friends that you all have gone to such extraordinary lengths to plan this gathering today and just make this happen. And as a family member, I feel really thankful for you all bringing us here. I live in Seattle, and so I get to see some of my other family from around the area. And I just want to say thank you so much for facilitating this today. It's really touching that Julie, I fortunately got to be really steeped in her wisdom from a young age. I'm named for her in my middle name. But to see her turn so many friends into family and see that she extended the same warmth and love to all of you as friends is really special. And I just appreciate it, and I want to say thank you today.
Hello, my name is Susan Greisen, and I live in the Cordata neighborhood. And when the Cordata Park, the one that's now named Cordata Park, was built, I saw that and I thought, who is going to come to that? You know, and I don't have any children, so I didn't understand that whole thing. So someone said earlier, dream it and it will happen, build it and they will come. And so the piece that really got to me was the trumpeter swans. When there was just a couple little ponds of water, trumpeter swans landed there. The mallard ducks landed there. The grouse were there, plus maybe many other animals, I don't know. But the other one, the children came. Not just the children from Cordata. People are traveling from other parts of the city. I see them in there and I'm asking, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Fairhaven, I'm coming to the park. And so look what she has done, and I am so proud to live in Cordata because of Julie.
Hi, I'm Nicole Oliver. I'm the park director right now. And I just had a quick story. Last year, after COVID, I went around and met neighborhood associations in the neighborhood parks. I hadn't seen all of the neighborhood parks, and I showed up at Juliana Park that had been recently renamed, and she's sitting, I'm late. I was late because of this other neighborhood that like 25 people showed up. You can guess which one it was. And she's sitting there by herself with no car in her walker. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm late. And she said, I was just really starting to get worried. You weren't here. I was dropped off, and they're not picking me up for another hour and a half. It was like, oh my, that was just last summer. So we ended up having just such a lovely conversation. She was always so curious and genuine, and you knew when she came to your meeting, you were like, okay, what are we going to do now? Because she was going to tell us what it was going to be, and she was always right. So.
Yeah, she was so direct, but it wasn't. You didn't get a deflated feeling when she told you what was true.
Hi, everybody. I'm Naomi Gary. I am a born and raised Unitarian. I moved here in 2019 and started attending Buff. And one of the first things that we did was join a chalice circle. And Julie happened to be in my chalice circle. I might not have met her because she didn't always come on Sundays. But we became friends. The first thing they said was, why are you here? And I said, well, I really just want to make friends. And I'd like to get to know Bellingham better. And so after our chalice circle, she said, hey, if you're willing to drive me around, I'll show you Bellingham. And the chalice circle was right after church on Sunday, so we threw in lunch once a month, and we kept going even during the pandemic. And she became my first and really one of my best friends here in Bellingham. And it's just been a joy to get to know her. What she didn't know is that my background is geriatric care management. And so I was happy to hang out with a 90-plus-year-old. It's what I do for a living, but she's just has been a joy in my life, and I also will carry her spirit with me forever.
Julie anecdote. Can you hear me? It's on? Okay. I meant to say this when I was up there, but I thought I'd talk too long. I thought maybe one of the family members would share this story because they shared it at her 90th birthday party, and I won't go into all the details, but when her nieces and nephews, and a lot of them were at the party along with her grandnieces and nephews and great-grandnieces and nephews at her 90th birthday party, when they were young, Julie didn't have children, and so they each got to go visit her, and she was living in Southern California at the time, and she'd pick them up at the airport in her convertible, I think it was a Mustang, and show them all over LA, and they probably went to Disneyland. And they did a lot of other fun things, and she told them, don't you dare tell your parents what we did, because you won't be able to come back.
Aunt Julie took us all, like I was 13, and she took us all, I think, at that age. And we spent a week with her, and she took me to see Hair in 1967. And I don't know if she told me not to tell, but of course I probably did. But it was quite the experience, and I'll never forget it. She took me to work with her, and I pushed the mail cart around at 13 years old and delivered mail to the places in the building and at KCOP, Channel 13, I think it was in Hollywood. And yes, she loved her convertibles, and I loved cars, and she had a 62 Tempest convertible, a 55 T-Bird, and I was born in 55, so I probably never saw that. And my brother tells me she had a great big Pontiac Bonneville convertible. I don't remember that one, but I remember the 68 GTO. She showed up at our house with a 68 GTO when I was 13 years old. She says, how'd you like to drive it? And I went, no, not doing that. I don't know why, I probably should have, but I didn't. But my dad taught me how to drive a year later. But there was a lot of things like that going on. Aunt Julie would come to our house, and she'd show up with a bottle of scotch and a pack of cigarettes. And she wouldn't get drunk, but they'd have a few drinks, and my mom didn't drink, and my dad it only had a little, but I remember that she'd always have fun and wish us well. And I got a bunch of notes here, but I don't think I'm going to do everything. But a lot of that stuff about no is the beginning of yes, and one of her things was that it's better to beg forgiveness than to ask permission. That was a big one. And she called me when Channel 13 went online that night. I think the debut of KCPQ, Channel 13 in Tacoma. The Deer Hunter was playing, and she says, "You got to watch." I go, "How come?" She goes, "It's unedited, and there's F-bombs everywhere." and so we watched it, and we were just unbelievable. It was like, you know, I don't know if you ever saw the show, but Robert De Niro and all those guys, you know, they dropped them everywhere, and it was on public TV, and we were just going, you know, can't believe this. That was, I think, 1981 or 82. I'm not sure what it was. But yeah, she was quite the gal, and I'd like to thank the people in her building, Alice Bell and Kathleen Hutchins and Diane Watson and Dan and Bill and Diane DeBay and Diane Tudor and Carol Cuomo for helping her out, and especially Nancy Zimmerman and Jackie Warners, who helped her stay in her apartment by giving her care for hours each week and up till the end. And it was just unbelievable. Also, who is it? You guys. Morgan and Jim, who allowed her to stay in their condo and for all those years and for the 20 years that she lived there. And it was just wonderful. And I want to thank you all.
Thanks, Ted.
Yes. I just wanted to mention that my wife, Mary Jane, and I, when we moved here in 2014, we lived in the same building with Julie. And we had many conversations. And I was so impressed with the history she could tell me about lots of things. And Mary Jane often picked up books for her from the library. And she was, up till the end, she was reading all the time. Probably one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever known. And we've been very fortunate to have known her. And I'm really sorry.
Thanks, Mike. Ted, what you said about the deer hunter made me think. I said earlier in my remarks that Julie was a realist. I think she wanted other people in the world, I think she wanted everybody to see the world as it really was. Something I really appreciated about her. Instead of bleeping the world, let's all acknowledge this is the world we're living. Let's see what we can do in it together. And the song that I asked the ensemble to sing today has a lot of naturalistic language, and it has a lot of language about the natural world that she immersed herself in. So I'd like the ensemble to sing for her now. already knew, and now we know more profoundly, that Julie's life made a wide and deep impact on this world. Now it's up to us to carry forward the qualities that she modeled for us. May we have such courage, humor, and goodwill. I'd like to close with a song. Those of you who haven't been here before won't know it, but that doesn't mean you can't sing along. Julie learned a lot at the very end of her life. It's number 123 in the great hymnals that are in your pews. These folks will lead it with strength. And it too is very succinct. It's just a very short song, but it says a lot in just a few words. So please stand with us and sing. Continue as the family has developed a wonderful reception for us all. Please go downstairs and greet them, say thank you to one another for being such good friends to her and being such good ongoing leaders of this community.